Aloha, ladies. Welcome. I am so excited to have you all here. Look at all these faces. Everyone's showing up for change. I love it. All right. I am truly honored to host this important event tonight alongside all of these successful female leaders and to celebrate Women's Equality Day. Yes. My name is Aisha Shapiro, and I'm the founder of the Ladies Artisan Market, also known as LAM, the LAM Networking Group for Women, the Whole Businesswoman Academy, and soon to be launched, our all-female business directory. LAM creates online and in-person marketplaces, events, conferences, workshops, trainings, coffee dates, networking events, and so much more. Our LAM networking group is composed of over 1,500 local Hawaii Island businesswomen, entrepreneurs, artists, and entertainers. I wanted to host this event because I'm a firm believer in equality for all women, as well as the importance of women in politics and all leadership positions. Time has never been more critical for women to get involved. So much is on the line, and our voices have been muted for far too long. I can't stress enough the importance of voting in your local elections and getting involved within the political sphere. Women are at the root of society. We are natural born leaders. Yet today we are still facing colossal gender equality issues, the lack of women in positions of power, patriarchy, sexism, racism, economic inequality, access to equal opportunity, and the struggles of navigating career and motherhood are just some of these issues. The best way we can combat this is to get involved. I understand that this may feel daunting or intimidating, that maybe you don't even know where to begin. But that's why you're here today, to listen to the stories of these women, to get inspired by their journeys, and to learn how you can actually take small steps to get involved. Just you showing up today is the start of making an impact. We can't change the entire world, but we can change the communities in which we live. So this is me getting involved. This is my first of many actions. On that note, I will pass this off to our amazing moderator, Shannon Matson, and thank you all so much for being here.
Mahalo, Aisha. Thanks again to Aisha and her whole LAM team, Ladies Artisan Market. You ladies are inspiring and incredible. And welcome again, everyone. I'm going to go over the housekeeping rules real quick. They are in the chat as well. But just a reminder, we are recording, and please try to stay muted unless you are called upon to speak or you are the active speaker. Be aware we can see you if your camera is on. We would love to have a really interactive group, so please keep your camera on if you feel comfortable doing so, but be aware that if your camera's on, we can see you and we are recording. Keep the chat comments limited to positive commentary and technical issues. If you're having some technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat and we will do our best to address them. And also we are recording and live streaming this on Facebook, and it will be broadcast later as well. So if you missed some of it because of technical issues, you can tune in later and check it out. And an important reminder is we are discussing the experience of female identifying political leaders here, not specific issues, bills, or policies that these public leaders may or may not support. So that's for another time and forum, not for this forum this evening. Again, I'm Shannon, and the idea for this event came from my discussion with Aisha, LAM's fearless founder, and I was saying just how incredible LAM is and what an awesome network of women that she's connected with and created this space for, and how badly we need more women in positions of power across the board, making decisions that benefit our entire community. And a lot of these LAM women are already walking the talk of being active and engaged in their own entrepreneurial worlds, and just how incredible it would be to see more of them stepping into leadership positions within the community in a broader sense. Rock star female Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's known typically as AOC, wasn't originally planning on running for office until a progressive action group reached out to her and attempted to recruit her to run to represent her community. She was active in local organizing and definitely cared about her community, but she wasn't a politician. and wasn't planning on running until this group kind of reached out and connected her. And so that might be what some of you need, is that support network of other women who are already doing this work or engaged in this work to help motivate you. Right now at the state level of government, our top leadership level, we have 0 female leadership. Neither our governor, our lieutenant governor, our Senate president, or our Speaker of the House in Hawaii are female. Both of our congressional House reps are men, and 1 out of our 2 senators at the federal level are men. So when you think about the generations of decision makers locally that have been male, you see that almost everything that surrounds us, every system, every budget, every law was passed and enacted with primarily male input and from the male frame of reference. One of my favorite Ruth Bader Ginsburg quotes is that sometimes she was asked when she thought there would be enough women on the Supreme Court, and her response was always, when there are 9. People were always shocked, taken aback. They felt like, that's not equal, you know, that's such a shift in the other direction. And she would say, well, there's been 9 men for so long and nobody's ever raised a question about that. Imagine a generation of decisions being made through primarily the decision lens of women. What a different perspective that would be, a different set of values and experiences that we could bring to the table to help shape our policies and programs and shift the current narrative of balance in power. Personally, I always shied away from using the term community activist to describe myself and the work I do, but over the last decade of involvement with local politics and campaigning for issues that are important to me and my community, I know that this terminology is the correct verbiage to embrace. It describes exactly what I do. I see and listen to my community and help them figure out how to turn those visions into tangible action, whether that's by organizing testimony at the county or state level, or supporting candidates for public office that uphold the values I believe in, or even running for office myself as I did in 2020. For myself, sometimes staying connected with national politics is so discouraging and overwhelming, which is why I focus most of my energy and time on local level politics. The collective knowledge that exists on this topic is pretty vast, but being involved in local politics and running for office is really hard to access for those who aren't already involved in the inner circle. So this is part of why we're having this event tonight. So you can hear from some of those who are living in it, have been living in it, and draw from these incredible sources of knowledge. So let's start by hearing from our local lady leaders about their experiences and any advice that they may have to those who are considering being more involved in local politics. Then we're going to have a discussion on what running for office and testifying might look like for those of you who are interested in being more connected and involved in local politics. There's many important issues on the table right now, as we all know, and a lot coming up in the next legislative session. And the best way to get your voice heard is to testify or consider helping out a candidate that you support in their race for re-election, or even consider running yourself. And we want you all to be engaged in this conversation, so feel free to ask some questions in the chat as you come up with them, and we're going to try our best to address all of them throughout this ongoing conversation. So let's start off this conversation with Senator Laura Acasio. She is Senator of District 1, which is primarily Hilo, but I will let her tell you more about what her district area includes and her unique journey as one of our newest legislators. Please go ahead, Senator Acasio.
Aloha. Good evening, everyone. So nice to be here. I feel honored to join everyone on this call. It's such a wonderful group of women who, do so much for the community and politics. So I just wanted to mahalo and share my gratitude towards Ladies Artisan Market for, coordinating this and putting it together. And thank you, Shannon, for also helping to coordinate and to MC. Shannon, you're definitely one of my role models and mentors amongst many of the women on this call. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you very much for the work you do in the community. I started this journey myself in civic engagement at a really young age. My family common conversations around our dinner table were around food security, solar power, apartheid, Iran-Contra scandal, immigration reform, gender equality. These are the conversations around the dinner table. So obviously, having that in my upbringing has led me to where I am today in terms of, the entire path. But I do want to say that, as I am, these are some character values. So some character values that I would like to bring into the mix too for all of this is humility and courage, integrity and truth telling, really standing up and being strong in the face of justice, being bold in that sense, even when you might be alone. And so, this really showing for myself is really dedicating life to be of service, even in moments where it's unpopular. So part of my story, I'm originally from Los Angeles. I moved to Hawaii and continued this journey of learning in Hawaii has continued to open my eyes to historical injustices that have occurred here in Hawaii and also elsewhere in the world, and making those parallels. These injustices continue today. So for myself, I look at these injustices and think, what can I do? What can I do as a mother? What can I do as a sister, as a friend, as a community partner to make changes around these injustices and to lead our, reflect and listen to our community and then help to lead in the direction of justice. So I have an interesting, in 2016, I got involved with the Democratic Party here locally in Hawaii on our island, being inspired by our first run of a woman president, Hillary Clinton, running against, actually for our Democratic caucus, we had to choose between Bernie Sanders, who I was also very inspired by in terms of his truth telling and speaking that truth to power in an atmosphere that doesn't necessarily always support that narrative. And so in the caucus, it was brought to my attention that here is a place to get involved in local politics. They have their meetings after, and so I got involved at that point. Shortly thereafter, I started becoming very aware of AOC, and again, really empowered by that. So along the way, there was this opportunity recently to put in my name. I became involved, in the Democratic Party locally, and had engaged and learned from many folks within the community about how things work within our party and within state politics. So that learning over 4 years led me to the place of being brave enough and thinking that I was qualified enough and that I have something to contribute to our legislative process and to our civic leadership by putting my name in the hat for Senator Kapela's vacated seat. In that situation, it was one of those things where you just had to dive all the way in and give it your all and feel like, no, this is the right thing to do, because here we have an opportunity to give voice to the values that we bring to the table. And not questioning that, just feeling like, no, this is a real opportunity for us to empower our community. And I know that, a lot of pressure was put on the governor, I believe, to nominate or to appoint a female. So I just would like to give props to that, because there was a lot of people, I think, working behind the scenes to educate and make folks recognize that the need for equality and the need to put a woman in that position is really important. And I can't tell you how empowering it is to be one of 10 legislators, which I believe is the most female senators that we've had at any given time. And so I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to take too much time. let others share, and I'll come back to some more stories later. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Senator. All right, next up is Senator Joy San Buenaventura. She is Senator of District 2. She also served as a House Representative of District 4 in Puna and is also a successful attorney. In '91, at only 32 years old, she was appointed as the youngest per diem district court judge in Hawaii. And she's an advocate for more women leaders at all levels of government. So go ahead, Senator San Buenaventura.
Aloha, and thank you so much, Shannon. And thank you for everyone being here to support women. I am a granddaughter of a Sakata, but I'm also an immigrant. My grandfather moved back to the Philippines, and my mom had me, so I was born in the Philippines. So I bring to the table the fact that I'm a Filipina, I'm an immigrant, and as well as the fact that I grew up because my mom had to raise me as a single mother with 4 children, also poor in Hawaii. I am a proud product of the public school system of Hawaii. I have been in practice for 30 years as a solo practice attorney. And I became an attorney because I was one of those, those of you who went to public school, we read To Kill a Mockingbird, and Atticus Finch and Scout were my heroes. We stood up for those who couldn't represent themselves. So why did I go into public service when I was an attorney? And I successfully argued in front of the Hawaii Supreme Court. In fact, my last oral argument was in 2013, the year I got elected, and thereafter, my practice has been diminished down to part-time work now. But that I was recruited by really county Democrats in Lower Puna. The incumbent, they felt that the incumbent was representing herself and not the community. And they needed somebody strong to represent them. Frankly, I thought that because I lived most of my life in Hilo and only moved to Puna a couple of years prior to my election, that I was not going to be welcome. But the reality is, because I was a solo practitioner, because I represented a lot of the poor. In fact, like I said, the last 2 Supreme Court cases, it was court appointment, both of whom were Puna residents. A lot of my clients, their families, they knew who I was. And despite the fact that the odds were against me, and if you talk to political leaders at the time, they didn't think I had a chance of winning, because there were 4 people running against the incumbent, and usually with those kinds of odds, the incumbent would win. So what I brought to the table is the fact that I have represented a lot of women in family law cases. And in fact, today I gave some advice to the fact that one of the bills that I introduced is actually being put into effect, and that is the automatic restraining orders. This poor woman from Puna did not know what to do because she thought her husband was going to start selling things before she had an opportunity to do that. One of the bills that I introduced that we passed put an automatic restraining order upon filing of a divorce so that he cannot sell. He cannot cut off utilities, even if it was in his name. He cannot grab the kids from the schools, because we passed this bill that I introduced based upon my experience with representing the poor, impoverished people in Hilo and in Puna. So these are the things I brought into the table. I am Chair of Human Services. I am a 4-term legislator. This is my first term as a senator. The last 3 terms I was a state representative. As Human Services, like I said, I represent make sure that the general assistance benefits, that was the first bill I passed as a senator that introduced, was an emergency appropriation for the poorest of the poor to ensure that the human services general assistance benefits, which they had under budgeted, actually paid out. And I was very proud of that. And that's my story. And I encourage all of those who, even though they didn't think that they would be a politician, like Senator Acasio and myself, that this is public service and that you could do more for the community by being part of the system. Thank you. Aloha.
Mahalo, Senator. Our next senator has been involved in local politics since 1984, when she was elected to our county council. And she has since been the first Filipino-American woman in the US to serve as a mayor. She also served on the state senate from 98 to 2008. And Senator Lorraine Inouye is the senator of District 1, which includes North Hilo, Hamakua, Waimea, Kohala area. She's been senator of District 1 since her successful campaign in 2014. I'll let Senator Inouye tell you more about her varied experience at the different levels of local government and how much has changed for women in politics from then to now.
Thank you. Aloha. Aloha out there in Zoom land. Thank you, Shannon, and the women, the ladies in politics. So appreciative of you giving us the time to hear us today. And I thank my Senate colleagues, Senator Laura Acasio and Joyce and Buenaventura, a very old dear friend. And I'm so happy just to share with you before I start and introduce myself that as Laura did mention, this is the first time we have 10 women, but let me share with you, when I was elected in the Senate the first time, we had 3 senators and I was the only woman. And so I'm so happy that we got 3 women in 4 Senate seats and 1 guy. Anyway, I'm Senator Lorraine Inouye, and I'm the senator for Senate District 4. And this district is the largest district in the state. I'm sure many didn't realize that. Oftentimes when I mention it, it carries me from right outside of Hilo, which is only 3 miles out, all the way to Hamakua, all of the North and South Kohala, Waikoloa Village, on to from mile marker at the Saddle Road, DKA Highway, 19 mile marker. So the Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa is in my district, all the way over to Mamaloa Highway, on to Maukakona, all the way down Kaiminani, and then make a left. I got the airport and on to Natural Energy Lab. So having said that, we can put 3 islands in my district. Just to add, I've had 37 years in political office. I'm not sure how many within the 4 minutes I can handle that, but I'll try real hard. I started off as, before becoming a politician, my background is in hotel management for 20 years, became management out of that. For 10 years, I've been in the hotel management and the visitor industry. Very active in the Hilo scene as well, chamber member, whoever wanted to have a wedding or wherever from all over the places in our country and the state and local activities, you go see Lorraine. So having said that, I have, fortunately, when the Hilo Hawaiian Hotel opened, I was asked to open up the hotel as a vice assistant manager in 1975. And so having said that, the opportunity to work for a chain, which included the Kona Lagoon, the Hilo Lagoon, and the Hilo Hawaiian Hotel. I was assistant manager for Hilo Lagoon and the Hilo Hawaiian, but also was the overall director of sales and marketing that included Kona. And so it took me, before I became a politician, all the way of my community service, both in the East Hawaii and all the way into Kona as well. Having said that, I was fortunate before I became a politician in the 70s. There was an opening for a planning commissioner, and Mayor Kimura, there was no woman on the panel, and I got appointed. And so having served in that position from 74 to 79, and having been the chair the last year of service, I had done super work. So what we see today and what our commissions did at that time, approval of the rezoning of the entire Waikoloa region from the Mauna Kea Beach Hotel all the way to the airport, there was nothing there. But we decided, well, we're going to create a resort zone and housing for the developer as well, and what we see today. Having said that, when my term expired, I also, in 1980, there was a vacancy on the Governor Ariyoshi's Hawaii State Plan. And so since I've already gotten off the local planning board, I guess Governor Ariyoshi somehow found out that he'd like to appoint me to sit on the board. So state planning for the entire state and serving on the County Planning Commission was pretty much my contribution to the communities of Big Island. Having said that, in 1980, the time when whatever year and decade comes along with elections, in 1980, I think that's the time when people wanted new faces. And I was approached while I was still working at the hotel in Hilo at the Hilo Hawaiian. You would not believe it, but a Republican Party came to ask me to run for the county council. And so having said that, Senator Richard Henderson came to visit me and encouraged me to run. I did tell him, I have to really think about it because I'm a sugar plantation family. My dad came from the Philippines. My mother was Puerto Rican, Spanish, and French. And so pretty much Democrats. So I told him, can I sit on it and think about it? Because coming from a family of 8, I'd be chastised. Anyway, I thought about it and I could not, and it wasn't a right time for me. I didn't feel good about running for political office. So I declined. In 1984, as well, I was very active in the Democratic Party in my precinct and the district as well. And so in 1984, so 1983, same thing, wanted some new faces. I was offered, I was asked by the county party chair, who was Bill Kikuchi, and he was the liaison for Senior Senator Danny Inouye, the liaison for the Big Island, came to see me to run as a Democrat and run at large. Now, during that time, there was, it was an at-large system. So everyone on the Big Island, all voters voted for all 9 of us. So this was before the term limits changed, as well as the years of service. And having said that, there was an opening for an at-large seat, which the vacancy was for 3 people. There was a vacancy then because at that time, our Councilwoman Helene Hale decided to leave the at-large position to run for mayor. And so having said that, I did accept the Democratic Party to run as a Democrat and to run as an at-large seat as well. And the other 6 were district representatives. But again, as I see, all voters voted for all of us. It was kind of interesting because that was my first election and campaign. And having said that, the only thing I owned was my car, no money. And so I had to start from scratch. Worked hard because it was an at-large position, campaigning throughout the entire island. Having said that, we worked hard, and you would not believe, because I had all of the votes as a leader during that election. So I had more votes than the other two who were already in as a council person and won those elections. And so having said that, that was an accomplishment, having no money and having campaigned and throughout the entire island. So having said that, I did serve for 6 years. And at that time, there were, again, like I say, well, let me go back. When Helene Hill left, her slogan was 4 in 84. And I think Joy remembers that. So she wanted to have 4 women in the county seat, including the mayor's seat, and 3 other on the council. And so that was her goal, but unfortunately, she lost the mayor's seat, and it ended up with 2 of us women on the council during those years. Having said that, so I served for 6 years. I won the next election after that. And then, of course, we all remember our mayor, Akana, had passed away. So there was an opening. There was a vacancy. And so who would run for the vacant seat? And please remember now, this is in the 80s. So it was the party of the old boys. So the men were in charge of politics, big time. And so there was pretty much no place for women, and those that were successful worked hard at what they do. So having said that, amongst some of us on the council trying to figure out who's going to run, I wasn't even thinking about that because I thought my colleagues on the council would be, I think, more inclined to run, but the council chair did decide to run. And so he was an attorney, was a councilman for many, many years. And so having said that, I think the community just felt that we want somebody else as well. And so communities and some of my colleagues said, okay, it's your turn, Lorraine, you take it. So
Mahalo nui, Senator Inouye. It's really remarkable that 3 out of our 4 island senators are female. Ruth Bader Ginsburg would definitely have been proud. We'll come back to hear more of your stories in a little bit. I'm going to continue on though, to give everyone a chance to share their stories. Overall at the state level, we're still only at 36% representation female. So we've come a long way, as you were telling us. It's pretty remarkable. But on the other end of the spectrum, in the state house, we only have 2 female identifying reps from our entire island. And we're grateful that both of them were able to join us this evening. Keep in mind that these are only 2 out of our 7 island house reps, which means we're at 28% female. Across the islands, we're looking at 31% representation. There's 16 women and 35 men currently serving at our state house. Now, I know when I make it a numbers thing, it seems like a competition or that the only thing that matters is being female. But we're just drawing attention to this issue because women are at 50.6% of our population on Hawaii Island, and yet being so underrepresented across the board in politics. And representation matters. While of course there may be some men who are thinking of women's issues when they make their decisions, overall it's important to note that the unique perspective and experience that women bring to the table is a huge influencer in all policy issues, as our senators have been discussing, especially in regards to more gender-specific issues like paid maternity leave or women's health care. And those policies have been shown that across the board, they really do benefit everyone, not just women. Local political activists in Hawaii sadly joke that the Hawaii State House is where good bills go to die. And until we hit more than 50% female voices, we can blame at least some of that problem on our lack of representation. So who's doing the hard work of representing us at the State House? First, let's hear from Representative Nicole Lowen. She represents District 6, which is primarily the Kailua-Kona area. And Representative Lowen actually won her House seat in 2012 after the redistricting process from the 2010 census, which we are going through again right now. So that's something to be aware of. Hopefully we'll have time to chat about that a little bit more later. It's pretty important that we're all paying attention on the Big Island right now regarding the redistricting process. Anyway, what was interesting to me about Rep. Lowen's first primary race is she won by only 45 votes. So imagine that the next time you feel like your vote doesn't count, if all of the ladies on the call right now who has turned into this event had chosen to participate or not during that vote, that could have shifted the election one way or the other, as the case may be. So really incredible that Nicole Lowen made it through that race. That's a really close margin. So anyway, go ahead, Representative Lowen. Thanks for waiting patiently. I know we're a little bit behind schedule, but if you're still on the call, go ahead and turn on your camera.
I'm here. Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for everyone who organized this event. It's nice to be here. I see some familiar faces of some people I haven't seen in a while, so that's nice too. So I guess I'll start a little bit about me. I was not born and raised in Hawaii, but I moved here in 1996. So I've been here for 25 years now, which is more than half my life. It's definitely a home for me. I worked at different places in Kona, but ultimately worked at Hawaii Montessori School teaching and then in the administration for more than a decade. And then decided to go back to school for graduate school at UH and studied urban planning. And so I had been, I think I was always a voter. I was always interested in politics, but wasn't quite so directly involved. I did do some volunteering for some candidates on Hawaii Island, probably back in the 90s, early 2000s. But when I started graduate school, I always had an interest in environmental issues. So this has very much been what I've continued to focus on during the time I've held office. And actually now I'm chairing the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection in the State House. But I worked while I was in graduate school at the UH Environmental Center. And part of that job included tracking legislation and soliciting testimony from UH professors, et cetera, so that the view of the university was represented. And then I also worked as part of that graduate assistant job on a study of Chapter 343, which is like the state's law that outlines the process for environmental review, like EISs is something people are familiar with. And so part of that our final report involved coming up with recommendations for the legislature. And so through that experience, I became much more involved in legislative issues and what was happening at the Capitol. I also became active with Sierra Club at that time and was on their executive committee for the state and helped to pilot the Capitol Watch project, where we would track certain bills and send them out to the email list and get people to submit testimony. And so in 2012, when I was finishing up graduate school, I had an opportunity open up to work at the state capitol as a committee clerk for, it was then Representative Denny Kaufman, who represented Kona. And, I wasn't quite sure if I should take it or continue looking for a job that was, not temporary and paid a little bit more. But I decided to do it. I thought it would be a valuable experience. And then, as Shannon mentioned, it was a redistricting year. And when the new maps came out, there was a new district because we had gained a House seat for Big Island that year. That was, where my house was, where I still held my residency on Big Island. And so after, much deliberation and uncertainty, I decided to just go for it and run for office and see what happened. And it was, as Shannon mentioned, it was an open seat. There were 4 people in the primary. And so that really split the vote multiple ways. I ran against an Akaka, which was a big name to beat. So I really spent a lot of time pounding the pavement. And I think, the lesson there, if anyone's interested in running for office, is that no matter what people have going for them, I think the person who's willing to work the hardest, that really gives you an advantage. So, I knocked on doors and probably walked the district 2.5, verging on 3 times throughout that primary. I don't want to take up too much time. I'm happy to keep it brief. I I think, again, I've continued to really focus on environmental issues, but once you get into office, you realize that you have a lot of constituents to answer to. And there's a lot of other important issues that are top of mind for a lot of people: housing, homeless, cost of living, things like paid family leave, and, other women's issues that are so important. And so, it's really like you have to catch up quickly to learn a lot about all these different topics. And so I think, there's a lot of things I've worked on throughout the time I've been at the legislature. I'm at 9 years now. So next year, when I complete this 5th term, will make 10 years. And so I don't think elaborate on like every single bill that I've worked on or thing that we've passed. But I will say, just going back to what you said as the opening, which was that the House is notoriously where good bills go to die, that we also pass a lot of really good bills. And I think, it's important to focus on both. And there have been times, I think that it is true in recent years that a lot of the more progressive measures have moved out of the Senate and then not passed out of the House. But I would say like that has shifted. It kind of goes back and forth over the years. And what really matters is what is able to come out of conference at the end of the day, because one chamber might be willing to pass a bill out of, for the first half of session, but that might not mean they're on board for passing it in conference. So I don't know that casting blame is productive. I think we can certainly do better, but the House and Senate both have done a lot of good. And we've, I'm proud, especially of this past session. I feel like we passed a ton of great environmental measures, some really good things for agriculture, and all the pandemic response stuff, which has been super challenging for all of us. So I just think sometimes it's important to cheerlead a little bit for the good things that we've done while recognizing that we have more work to do. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, mahalo, Representative Lowen. Definitely wasn't casting blame, more just a note that is something that has been said many times, unfortunately, about the House. And especially this last session, as we did have some progressive measures that did pass in the Senate and didn't make it through the House. And unfortunately, we'll be talking shortly about what that process looks like to get bills passed. So for those of you who might be a little more new to politics, it is a really complicated process that goes back and forth. And then I see a question in the chat that came through, and yes, please post your questions. It's a great question and we'll be getting to it shortly. We have one more representative here that we're going to give a chance to introduce herself, and then we'll be going into some questions and some more details on what it looks like to testify and run for office. So let's hear next from our House representative from District 5, Representative Jeanne Kapela. She represents South Kona, Ka'u, and she's served as the executive director of the Miss Kona Coffee Scholarship Competition, as well as working on numerous programs and organizations to address human trafficking and sexual exploitation, abuse of women and children. So take it away, Rep. Jeanne.
Aloha, everyone. Wonderful to see you all. It's such a privilege to be here with you folks. Happy Women's Equality Day. I don't know about you, but I got nervous listening to Senator Inouye give her background. She's been in office longer than I've been alive, and there's such big shoes to fill, and so amazing to be in so many of these women's presence, as well as share this space with all of you. My name is Jeanne Kapela. I represent District 5 in the State House. My pronouns are she, her, and it's just a privilege to be here with all of you. I am a first-time legislator. I ran for office in 2018, narrowly lost my election to a 5-term incumbent, and then decided to run again in 2020. And I was so privileged to have won that seat. I'm the first woman, Native Hawaiian, and person born and raised in the district to ever represent it in the State House. And I am a firm believer that representation truly matters. I brought up Senator Inouye because I feel like she was a trailblazer, and on the Big Island, specifically, everything that we do, just getting up, just getting your kids to school, getting your family members to school, getting to work, keeping food on the table and a roof over your head is a struggle. So when women come together and we run for office and we support one another and we support each other's campaigns and we get involved in all the extras, we do all the volunteer work and we do the campaigning and all these extra things. It's a testament to the strength and resiliency of women, and also the strength and resiliency, I think, of our own communities. I didn't come from a very political family. I'm a born and raised Kona girl, and politics was really never something in the cards for me. I think for me, politics became this thing that I became incredibly interested in, not because I went to a fancy school and learned about poverty in a book. It was because I experienced it firsthand. And I felt so often that some people in the legislature, some people that held positions of power weren't listening or hearing my voice. And I wanted to make a change for that. I wanted to see other young women who looked like me, who talked like me, who had struggles and who also wanted to fight for change, succeed. And I know that I might be the first person to hold this seat for my district, but I will not be the last. And I guess for me, politics became this thing of witnessing and feeling long histories of injustice, both as a Native Hawaiian, as a woman, and just also as an individual. I think there's so many injustices that we face every single day, and politics is one of the fastest, I'm not gonna say easiest because it's not easy, but one of the best ways that we can advocate on behalf of ourselves and for those who cannot advocate for themselves. I got involved in politics as well through the Miss Hawaii organization. And I ran for Miss Hawaii. I'm a former Miss Hawaii 2015. I won Miss Congeniality at Miss America, so at least you know I'm nice. That's my joke. But my platform was actually on ending sexual exploitation. And through that, I started a nonprofit organization called Unite Hawaii, where where our goal was to end sexual exploitation, and our mission through education. So we worked directly with schools and directly with people who would be targeted themselves, young teenagers and young women and young men as well, to teach them how they can protect themselves, their family, and their friends from the dangers of human trafficking. And I began then advocating at the state capitol. Many of the women that are on this screen with us today are women that I have testified in front of and felt those jitters and those nerves and had to read directly from the book because I was so nervous to get my testimony across. But it's amazing to see that kind of growth. And the reality is that you don't have to be perfect to run for office. You don't have to be a doctor or a lawyer or a business executive. You have to be someone that is compassionate and willing to fight for the change that you want to see in your communities. So I think for me, some of the challenges and triumphs that I've faced as a young Native woman is really breaking stereotypes. From the time I ran for office and campaigned to every single day that I'm in office to today, even, there were some very nasty comments on one of my social media pages, but I've faced, as many I think of these women and as many of you on this call have faced as well, racism and sexism and classism. And those are things that happen, but unless we confront them with strength and resilience, and we strive to be that light, those are the same things that are going to impact us every single day. And every woman that decides to run for office is going to feel those same pains and those same struggles. So we have to confront them and we have to call them out and we have to be the lightning rod. So for me, Shannon mentioned AOC. She is an incredibly huge role model of mine. And she said, change takes courage. So for every single person that decided to show up today, thank you for having the courage to be here and taking that first step towards getting involved or for running for office as well. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Representative Kapela. And you did speak about testifying, and that's kind of the next portion of our event. I wanted to touch on how we can testify at the county and state level. I think that's a really important conversation to have. But there is a question in the chat right now, so I was going to open that up and allow us to at least address that first question and hopefully some of the others as they come up while going through the rest of the program. And this first question, Kaylin, I believe is how I say her name. And she's wondering if any of you could discuss how you try to build consensus within such a diverse population. Some of you are representing districts that span, as Senator Inouye said, 3 islands with. So how across those large populations do you create consensus? And I'm gonna kind of just let us popcorn around if anyone wants to jump in on that. And then in a few moments, I'll bring us back to the testimony discussion. But go ahead, does anyone feel super called to speak first on that? Yeah, go ahead, Senator Inouye.
Okay, so when your comment is the consensus of our Big Island, right? And not the state as a whole.
Yeah, she didn't specify, but either, I think
Okay.
both of those are important.
Okay.
Yeah, how do you create consensus in general?
I would say amongst us in the legislature, we're pretty good about the Big Island group. We have a Big Island delegation. Unfortunately, with COVID, we haven't met in person. And because of all the changes, the closing of the Capitol, we've been pretty much on Zoom. But there are special bills or legislative actions from our own colleagues on the Big Island. And let me share some of that with you as an example. I chair the Water and Land Committee, and also that entails a lot of issues on our Big Island. And with the legislation from Rep. Lowen, our male colleague, Senator Kanuha, and having part of my district in Kona as well, particularly the beaches, we're concerned about lifeguards. We're concerned about access to beaches. And we know that most of our beautiful beaches are on the west side. And so having said that, you know, we support each other and we make sure that those measures try to get out of the loophole. And so if most of that kinds of bills would come to my committee. And so having said that, we try to support that measures and move it along. But granted, you know, as Nicole mentioned earlier, you never know what bills are going to come across or what bills are going to die, even if they're good stuff. And there's many hundreds of bills that are all good stuff because we are doing the people's work. And so having said that, no different that our cooperation, you know, with Joy, with Puna, and you know, we got, I was chair prior to taking this role as chair of Water and Land after Senator Kahele left, I was chair of transportation. So we know that roads are very important for Puna, no different than Kona. And so we try to work together, make sure that, you know, we have the resources, but what's the priority? And they have to come up with their priority in the district. So there's a good relationship of sharing and working together. Thank you. Yeah, did someone else want to add on to that?
Yeah, so Shannon, let me add to that. So what Senator Inouye said is right, that the Big Island, we do our best to promote Big Island interest, because the reality is what is occurring on the Big Island is foreign to Oahu. For example, our subdivision problems here in Puna. I mean, we come into blows here. We call the police sometimes for the HOA meetings, and it's really foreign to them. And it may take many years, it has taken many years to try to educate the rest of the state as to the problems in Puna in order to be able to pass legislation. So consent, when you're talking about consensus among constituents, that, as you folks know, because I represent Puna and East Ka'u, my community has huge differences of opinion. And basically, I'm still able to get elected every time I've run. And I don't know necessarily whether or not there's consensus in everything I have I have voted for or have put forth or introduced. All you can do is, like Senator Inouye says, the people's work and do the best that you can. And it's up to us as leaders to educate our constituents as to what we see as the best interest for our community. So I don't know whether or not we can actually get consensus among our constituents for every single thing, but we can educate them as to why we voted the way we voted and why we introduced what we've introduced and why we believe that it is the best interest for our community and for our state. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so let's get back to discussing testimony here, because I think that this is really, I call it like testifying is the gateway drug to running for office. I think some of us, as even just Representative Kapela was talking about how she's testified in front of some of these legislators in the past, and then moved on to actually becoming a House rep. This is something that we can all easily participate in, especially now. I call it like a COVID silver lining, that now we can do a lot of the Zoom connections here at the county level and at the state level. Before, you had to fly over to Oahu to testify in front of the Senate and the House. And this last session, we were able to testify remotely. So feel free to let me know in the chat if you have questions about this particular topic. For those of you who've never testified before, again, it can feel a bit daunting, but once you do it a couple times, you realize that it's not that challenging, and it's a great way to engage with our elected leaders. Also, if you attend and tune into some of these county council meetings or these committee meetings at the state level, you can kind of see who's asking good questions, who's staying engaged, who's really representing your interests, and who you agree with on a value level. Or you can also see who maybe isn't representing your values, and then that's an opportunity to maybe decide what seat you want to run for in the future, if you don't feel like your needs and values are being represented. Or you find somebody that you want to support in the next upcoming election because you see the good work they're doing and you want to support that. So with county council, it's year-round. Testimony is usually being accepted before noon on the business day before the scheduled meeting. And you can tune in online and testify via Zoom or by written means on any of the agenda items. The full council meetings are typically every other Wednesday. That's at least 2 Wednesdays in the month. Usually it's like the first Wednesday and the third Wednesday. Sometimes that does shift around. And the committee meetings are the Tuesday preceding the full council meetings. And for a bill or a resolution to get passed, it typically needs to be heard and passed in committee, sometimes in multiple committees, before going to the full council meeting for another 2 hearings or readings, as they're called, at separate council meetings. So that's 2 different chances, if you count in the committee, 3 different chances for the council to hear public testimony and vote on those topics. And then once it gets passed, the bill will then move to the mayor for approval or veto. The council can then override the mayor's veto with a supermajority, or the bill would die for the time being. Otherwise, if the mayor signs it, it can become a law. And I'm significantly oversimplifying things here. This is just a rough idea of how many steps a bill, a piece of legislation would go through at the county level before it gets passed. So we're going to put the link to submit testimonies and tune into the council meetings in the chat now. Like I said, it goes on year round, so there's many opportunities to participate at the county council level. The process for the bills at the state level is relatively similar, but much more complicated. The process only happens for a few months in the year. The state legislative session, unless there's special sessions, begins after mid-January. So it'll start mid-January 2022. I believe it's January 19th for the upcoming session, and it's usually complete around the end of April. Again, sometimes there's exceptions to this. Bills introduced by our legislators go through a very quick process of first needing to get a hearing, which is really controlled by just a few committee chairs. And sometimes bills need to be, usually bills need to be heard in multiple committees, which takes a while for them to get through all of those committees. And that's where you'll have the opportunity to testify if you're interested in seeing those bills get passed. Sometimes the first important public step is we need to put pressure on the committee chairs to even get the bills a hearing or scheduled for a hearing. Thousands of bills get introduced each session. Really only a very small amount make it through the entire process. They also have to go through both the Senate and the House, or vice versa, the House and the Senate. But there's this period called crossover where the bills pass from one body that they've been reviewed and commented on to the other body, and they see if they can both agree on the language and whether or not to bring the bills to the floor for a vote. Again, I'm oversimplifying. So if I got anything wrong here, I invite the legislators to chime in a moment here and correct me. And then also I know there's some questions popping up in the chat. But once a bill makes it through this whole process, then it still has to go through the before the governor, either for approval and being signed in, or rejection, or sometimes it gets neither approval nor rejection. It just kind of gets ignored, and then it turns into a law that way if the governor doesn't want to sign it, but doesn't want to veto it. So we're also going to be placing the link to submit testimony at the state level. Even though there's no opportunities to submit testimony at the moment, you can still register, set up your account, and kind of explore the website. The state website's a little more user-friendly than the county website in my personal experience. And there's actually some really great YouTube video tutorials that you can search for, and it'll explain the process on how to submit testimony in more detail. So that's really helpful if you've never submitted testimony at the state level before. So before I go too much further into the details on running for office, I just wanted to open it up again to questions. So let me see. Oh yeah, and I see people.
Can I, since your question was how the changes using our new technology system at the legislature, I'm not concerned about the council because we're talking about state now, but the pros and cons on how we move along with our communications and public hearings. So can I just add something?
Of
on
course,
pros and cons? Because I'm in leadership in the Senate, and when we decided that we're going to be doing this Zoom because we closed the Capitol as well, there's pros and cons. And the pros, I believe, is the best for our communities, because if you have disabilities and as big as our districts are, and because we're separated from Oahu, it's best for our communities on the Big Island. And that's a plus. I find that it's not convenient with the Zoom. And let me share with you, because I am a chair. We are limited because there's 25 of us, and we're limited with our technology system and sharing how many, we have 14 committees. And then for that particular days or our schedules, we're limited. So as an example, I can have tons of bills, but I only have an hour and 45 minutes. So that means that all the bills that we have to hear, we can't. So many bills get shoved away, and they're good bills. So we have to pick what bills within that period. However, there's also rules. A speaker can speak only 2 minutes. And you tell me there's very important bills that our constituents and communities want to talk about. And so we have to ring the bell and saying your time is up. And that's, to me, the most unfortunate piece of this particular process. Whereas if we have the regular session, if you're there to come, and normally for me, I always ask whoever is from the neighbor islands first, you speak first, no matter if you're signed on the bottom of the sheet for sign-ins. I always take care of the travelers first. However, and we can cut them off later, but they'll have more time. So for me, the process is, hopefully we can get back to it, but the good thing about it is that many of our constituents in our outlying communities have access and the capability to speak instead of traveling.
Yeah, thank you. And I actually just had a private question that someone sent to me. They're wondering if the Ledge is planning on continuing to take testimony on bills via Zoom even after COVID is settled. Do you think that that's something that we can continue to have access to? Because that's just been such a wonderful tool for
Exactly.
people to stay connected.
On the Senate, we're discussing that because we thought something would end soon because we're doing so well with our COVID, adjusting our share of getting to a point where we thought, the pandemic is going away, but I don't see that in the future. I think for us, we're going to be continuing on the rest of this year. I think we're also looking at continuing it through the opening of session next year, probably through the entire session, because again, we're only open for 4.5 months.
Yeah, hopefully that'll be something that continues on. Another great question that we just received. Let's let somebody else take this one. If you don't mind, Senator Inouye, thank you though
Sure.
for all of that. Is what is one piece of advice that you wish you had received prior to running for office? So I'm not sure who would like to take that one first. Anybody? Don't make me call on somebody. Let's see. And I know, I guess maybe this wouldn't apply to Senator Acasio, but maybe, I don't know, Rep. Lowen, do you feel comfortable taking that question on first?
Sure. I think we're all being quiet because it's a tough question to answer, to think of one thing or almost anything. I mean, sometimes I kind of joke when I tell the story of how I ended up running for office that, if I had any idea what I was getting into, I never would have done it. Because I think there's just so much that it's such a different experience running for office or being an advocate. I mean, Shannon, you've experienced this somewhat too, so you could maybe also answer this question to a degree. But I mean, I think it's like figuring out a way to take care of yourself and to, I guess, figure out how to get to not let to have a thick skin, which is something that all public servants need to have. But I think especially as women or not, I mean, I think that it's not natural to a lot of us. And it's easy, especially when you're new to office or running for office, to like put so much in. You want to respond to everyone, you want to be accessible. And I still try to do that, but it's also like sometimes the rate at which you can do that isn't sustainable over 9 years. So it does get a little intense. That's not really advice, but maybe just a perspective on what it feels like.
I really appreciate all of that. I think balance is so important. I wanted to speak a little bit more. We'll get back to some more questions in a moment, but I wanted to talk a little bit more for those of you who maybe haven't been as politically active in the past, why you personally might consider supporting these ladies who are already our elected leaders, or consider running for office yourself. And of course, I could talk about the subject for hours, but I recently read a story on the Kona Moms Forum on Facebook that I thought really illustrated this subject. And I'm adapting this story to my talk right now, so forgive me if I get some of the details a bit wrong. But it was a mom commenting on a playground in Kona that her and her kids used to use regularly that she thought was being neglected and really needed some improvements. And she got a lot of support from other moms in her post, and then she reached out to her county council member for support, I believe. So then she came back to the moms community and asked what sort of improvements they wanted to see, and explained she was fundraising and working with the county to match funds for that improvement project. And this is how some of these sort of projects need to happen at the county level. If there isn't enough money in the budget, some of it has to come from community sponsorship or fundraising to make these dreams a reality. Now, all of this might not seem political, which is why I'm bringing it up. It's just a mom wanting to fix something in her community that would benefit her children and their friends and neighbors. But that's exactly what politics is and community organizing is. By those efforts and actions, she's helping to create momentum to get the funds together and the project going and the conversation started, and all of that ends up benefiting her community. So it's a really small example, but it's a big step towards getting the positive changes going that we want to see in our communities. So the nitty-gritty stuff of running for office is more of that overall communication with those in your community about what they want to see changed, but on a bigger scale. And yes, the door knocking and sign waving and fundraising and phone banking and sending out mailers can all be crucial, but it really starts with a will to make change in your community, and then the grassroots grow from that. So first you have to have a vision, and then figure out how to communicate that vision to those in your community that would also benefit from it. We're going to be placing the link to the Office of Elections in the chat box now. So that link there is really great resources, all the basics of requirements for running for office, all the dates you need to know if you're interested in running for office or supporting somebody else's campaign. You can explore that link. And then of course, feel free to reach out to me after this event if you have further questions. And keep in mind, it might only be August right now, but primary voting, which is where most of our major decisions are made on the local level in Hawaii, is less than a year away. August 13th, 2022 is when we will know if most of these ladies are hanging on to their seats and being reelected if they choose to run again, and then moving on to the general election, or if they unfortunately are have a challenger come in and take that seat away. Those decisions are usually made here in the primary because of the, again, we're staying nonpartisan, but as you see, most of our elected leaders right now are in the Democratic Party here. So most of those races get decided in the primary. Mail-out ballots go into the mail mid-July of 2022, and most of the voters in Hawaii vote by mail now, which was decided before COVID, but definitely increased the participation during COVID, since a lot of folks were not yet vaccinated, or the vaccine wasn't even available then for people to go out to vote in person. So to begin the process, you start by pulling your papers to declare you're running for office starting March 1st, 2022. And then all candidates must have finished the filing process, which is gathering signatures of supporters in their district, by June 7th. And many serious candidates begin declaring they're running for office well before all of that process, sometimes as early as now, usually closer to January, February time, depending on what office they're going for. And then I have another great question for everybody here, but let me see if anyone has questions about that right now. Let's see. Oh, we have a question coming in from the Facebook live stream.
Shannon, there is one question above that was asked by Julie Zemelis, and it was, how can we support, female leaders right now, or, female candidates? Like, do we fundraise?
Fundraising. Yep, I got that one. Thanks so much, Aisha. I'm going to address that shortly because it ties into one of our other questions, but thanks for making sure I didn't miss that one. Let's go into this one right now. It's from the Facebook live stream. It's from a middle school educator looking for ways to inform and engage their students about local politics and how it impacts their lives. So any suggestions from you speakers here tonight about getting students involved at a young age, like how to engage with youth?
So Shannon, I am a chair of the Keiki Caucus, where basically we solicit, the student government, various Keiki children, minors, students, organizations to submit ideas for the upcoming legislative session. And I believe there's like a student congress where they put together proposals and bills. So there are already, sort state government type, student body government type organizations within the schools that they can participate in, but there's also like, and they can then be part of the Keiki Caucus where they could submit. Also a middle school, I believe, teacher, and I know Rep. Lowen says that sometimes they get over enthusiastic, but she also encourages them. What they do is they actually write to the various representatives and senators, and as to their ideas as to what can be fixed. And more often than not, at least I personally do my best to respond. But sometimes when we don't, it's usually because it's crunch time in the legislature when these requests come through. So there are already avenues and for them. And if that middle school teacher would like to email me, I can give her an avenue so that she can participate in the Keiki Caucus.
Wonderful, thank you.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
So one year, basically through a parent who was a friend of mine whose son was in the class, I went to a classroom at Innovations and talked to the students about, you know, you can basically just like we would screen share on Facebook, pull up the legislature's website and, you know, walk them through it. But we actually helped them write a resolution. They wrote a resolution about including education about climate change in the DOE curriculum. And then we introduced it and got hearings, and we actually set up remote testimony for them before we were actually doing remote testimony generally. So they got to like fully experience that. And we passed it out of the House, not the Senate. I think DOE, you know, it didn't really amount to much at the end of the day, but it was a great experience for the kids. And I think, you know, I know Rep. Kapela would be willing to do something like that, and Kona is in her district. So I think reach out to your legislator, because I think I always take people up on invitations to go into schools. It's one of my favorite things since I used to teach. So.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Rep. Kapela, did you have something to add to that?
Yes. To the Kona teacher who is on Facebook or here on Zoom with us, I would love to come and visit your class. I think it's a really good reminder to reach out to any of your legislators. Most of us absolutely love and adore those moments, the opportunities to connect with the next generation and inspire them and to be inspired by them is a privilege. I would also like to add that to look at the public access room, and I don't know how to put it into the comments on Facebook because I'm not on there, but if you look up the public access room, it actually can give you a really great array of student-focused coloring books, and they're arranged from kindergarten all the way through about middle school. They just did a new one this past legislative session that really depicts the entire legislative process and how students can get involved. So it's a good way to understand what the legislative process is. And lastly, to add to what Senator Buenaventura said, is through the Keiki Caucus this year, there's actually going to be, for high school students, a high school internship program connecting students from across our state with their state legislators. My office already does one for Kona High School. I have an incredible intern, Jade, but I'm excited that the Keiki Caucus will be doing that for our entire state. So be tuned and stay tuned for that information from the caucus.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we did have one more question that I wanted to get to, and then I had a personal story about some sexism I've encountered in my journey through politics. I was hoping to share that and then give everybody time to speak on that a little bit. It's a sensitive subject, but since we all are here together, I thought that might be a really powerful thing for us to share. But we're kind of running out of time, and I wanted to give everyone a chance to have like a minute or so to close and give any final thoughts. So I'm wondering if we can kind of combine all of these three things together and use that time to wrap up and have everybody have a chance to say a little bit more on this subject too. My story quickly that I wanted to share, and it's nothing earth-shattering, but I think it's just an important kind of demonstration of the sexism that does still exist even in this day and age, was that when I first put my name out there to potentially hold political office, it was for Senate District 1, and it was similar to the journey that Senator Acasio just went through, and it was due to the unfortunate passing of Senator Gil Kahele while he was in office. It was 2016. I had a 2-year-old, and I put my name in to run for, to be nominated, one of the 3 names that would go to the governor. And when I was there at the event for nomination, I was asked by 5 different individuals how I was going to manage being a senator while also having a 2-year-old daughter at home. Keep in mind, I'm married. My partner is an extremely wonderful caregiver. I can't even imagine the criticism I would have received had I been a single parent. Ultimately, the name that was chosen to replace me was Kai Kahele, who's currently our congressman at the federal level. And I definitely won't argue with anyone that even though he had never held public office at the time either, he was definitely more qualified than I was, and ultimately a good choice. But the thing that's noteworthy to me is that his daughter is the exact same age as mine. And not a single person at that event asked him how he was going to balance being a father with holding the position of senator. This is just one story. I've got a whole bunch of them, and I haven't even held political office yet. So I'm sure that our elected leaders here have some stories similar. I'm wondering if they have any that they would like to share, and primarily how you handled it. How do you think we can continue to shift the conversation and focus on issues and topics that are important to our community, and not just on what we happen to be wearing or how we're balancing motherhood with running for office, even though that is, of course, an important thing to consider. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a chance to address that. The other question that was asked that we didn't really go into in depth is how to support more women in these roles. So if you want to speak briefly about that, and then also please feel free to put your contact information, any upcoming town halls, anything like that that you have into the chat, so people can connect with you further beyond this event this evening. And then any other final thoughts that you might have. And so let's go in reverse order from how we began. So I'm going to start off here with Representative Kapela, if she is ready to go and address those questions. I know it was a lot, so do the best you can to address that. And let's try to keep it to about 2 minutes so we all have a chance to chime in on that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Shannon. Hearing your story of sexism is so heartbreaking to me, because I think it's something that on a daily level, so many women face. I don't have children yet myself, but I hope to one day have them. Finding a way to balance that or have a relationship is something that I'm still working on. So I'll let you know how it goes when it actually happens. But, you know, I think as a young woman, there are so many things that have been said to me on a daily basis. One of the most recent ones was a chair who came up to me right on the House floor and yelled in my face and told me that I find you so incredibly annoying, because I'm someone that I stand up for things that I believe in, and I'm not going to sit down and be quiet because you work so hard to get into office. You shouldn't sit down and be quiet. You have so many people in your districts that need a voice. So that was one. For me, I addressed that by making a complaint to the chief clerk's office, because that's harassment. I have had, I think another thing that I want to bring up is that oftentimes some of the most cruel comments that I've experienced when it relates to sexism actually come from women, or have come from women. Things like, sis, you should sit down, or I actually wrote some of them down. You should listen to your male colleagues, or do you still wear heels? And these are things that have nothing to do with the way I legislate, but or how I give my heart to my community. And I think the reality is that when we say awful things and we tear other women down, we hold these women hostage to the patriarchy that exists in our system, instead of attacking it at the root and lifting everyone up. Because at the end of the day, there is, just as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, it's never enough until it's all women. And there's enough space for all of us. So I think we really need to work on helping all women rise. I think at the end of the day, it's also about being able to share space with other women and find ways to connect with one another and lift each other up. And to know that we're not alone in our fight for, or a fight against injustices. So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you. And I look forward to connecting with you in the future. You can follow me on social media, or please send me an email if there's anything that you would like to talk about individually. My email is repkapela@capital.hawaii.gov. Looking forward to connecting with you all, and thanks again.
Thank you so much. All right, let's hear next from Representative Lowen.
Thank you. You know, I'm never good when I'm put on the spot to think of specific examples of things, but I think that there's just so much of that kind of everyday sexism that like we all know what that's like. Just, you know, when you are in a workplace that's heavily male dominated, just the way that people relate to each other, that if you're going to build those relationships that are so important, especially in politics, to have relationships with your colleagues, that you've got to hang out in a, you know, mostly male dominated group, and there's just a different kind of atmosphere. And sometimes it's not even that it's necessarily negative or sexist, but just that there's not an equality there. And, you know, there's other things that are more overtly sexist, certainly at the Capitol all the time. I mean, I would say it's worse than many workplaces, just because of the fact that we don't really, I don't think, have the same structures in place for the kind of HR violations that you would see in a normal business, because everything is political. There is favoritism, and that's like allowable in politics. So you can't, like, I don't know, makes it harder to kind of call it out, I guess. And then I guess the other thing that I think is important to be careful of is a lot of times people will say, well, look how many women are in powerful positions, even though, as Shannon mentioned, not the Speaker of the House or the Senate President, but we do have, you know, Majority Leader in the House, Finance Committee Chair, and other people in important positions. But, you know, that doesn't undo it, because I really do, when I look overall at the group, I think that it's like the women still had to work harder or just be twice as competent to get recognized, you know, for the same way. Whereas for men, it's just, it's like you can be mediocre and still be successful. And there's a side of it too, where I even feel a little bit like, and maybe all of my colleagues here feel this a little bit, like even in this kind of safe space event, it's going to get posted on social media. Like, I probably already said too much. I should be careful what I say. I mean, that's still part of it too, because that there is like that kind of retaliatory action that happens. So it's challenging, but, you know, I do appreciate the opportunity that I have to be able to serve my community. And, you know, despite all of those challenges, it's still worth it. But I think that just having more women there, and even though not all the women are going to agree on the issues, and, you know, for the people on this call, some might be progressive, some might be conservative, you know, having more women there, it's not about promoting a certain policy necessarily, but it's just about having equality in the culture. So yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to be here and talk to this group. I put my email and my website in the chat, and I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, pretty easy to find. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Lowen. That's such a valuable point. I really do appreciate that last one. So crucial is just having more voices, more female voices across the board. Really does change the conversations. Senator Inouye, if you would like to go next.
Sure. I'll highlight the sexism and challenges that I had during campaigns, because I think that's what people wanted to hear about, where we got when and how it was. And let me just point to an era, as I mentioned, when I ran for mayor, and it's 1990. And so, and all male persons who were more on top of politics than women as well. And so when I ran, I was an underdog. And so I'm not supposed to win. But I worked hard. But there were trash talks, and it was pretty bad. And so I'm glad that we didn't have Facebook and all those technology, social media at that time, because things travel. But the trash talk, so how would we handle it? And my attitude was, you know what, I'm just going to work harder, and I'm just going to go out there, pass my brochures, knock on doors, and just sell myself. And so, you know, it's that's what I did. And so, having said that, I won by 67 votes. Now, there was a challenge to it as well, because nobody in their own mind thought I would make it. So it was challenged by my opposition. It was at the county building. And when we talk about ethics in politics, that was a time when an election office running your vote counts, the doors are not closed. So everybody else was in there except my campaign, because I was at my campaign headquarters. And so all my opponents were there watching the vote count. But, you know, then I got a call, League of Women Voters, Lorraine, you got to get your people here because your oppositions are all watching this phone count. So I sent somebody down there. Having said that, I picked up 10 more votes. So that's just to prove that all you have to do is you just have to have a real hard heart and disregard things that are said about you, particularly during campaigns, because that's when it's going to happen. Having said that, it's during that time, the men dominated the scene. But in this corporate world, it's time that we women also be part of dominating the scene. We made progress, and as a councilwoman, as mayor, and as a senator, there's much more to do, a lot of work when we need to gain parity as well. But look at where we are today. On the city, county level, we had Helene Hale there, and in state level, we had Patsy Mink. Now we have, of course, we all know RBJ, our state Supreme Court justice. We had a first Attorney General in Hawaii, Margaret Bronster. And we can go on and on. We had the U.S. Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and of course we have our Vice President, Kamala Harris. So we have a long way to go, but we're gaining there. We're gaining track, and it's just a matter that we all have to stick together, fight for the needs that's up before us as well. But there's still work to do, but women have to make sure that we can take in all the trash that comes with it and stick with it. Don't give up. And another thing I'd like to say is always, if you're in politics, just make sure that you follow the ethical guidelines, because once you slip, it's very difficult to come back. And you look at me as well. I mean, I've had several elections, and so I'm still running and get elected just as a base. So just make sure that you have a good attitude and do what is best for the people of our communities.
Thank you, Senator. Really appreciate you joining us this evening. Senator San Buenaventura.
Hi, aloha. So I just want to add to what Kapela has said, because I was fortunate enough to actually be chosen in a panel of 3 for CSG West, specifically on this topic of women in politics. Because even though we elect, CSG is Council of State Government, so it's the state legislators in the Western states have a conference once a year. Of course, COVID has since forestalled it for a while. But anyway, the last one I went to was 2019, and I was in the panel, and even the elected officials, even the elected women face sexism on a daily basis. And just like what Rep. Kapela said, the most stinging rebuke come from those who are women themselves. And I think it's generational as well as changes in attitude. Generational in the sense that what I was hearing from these women were rebukes by older women telling them how to dress, how to say, how to defer to men in order to move far. And this is how women of their generation was able to move up. And so they were giving, they were giving old advice of how. So what I'm saying is this: I'm not going to forgive or excuse sexism comments, but also look at who is saying it. Because if it is an older woman, and it could very well be how she was able to attain where she was at. And she probably had to follow through on making sure and dress conservatively rather than what is comfortable. You know, removing what is feminine about her in order to fit in. Doesn't make it right now in 21st century. And like Ruth Bader Ginsburg has said, we have to, you know, when there are 9, that's when we achieve equality. When we stop thinking that whoever it is who is in office is there because of their gender or use their gender to achieve their status. There will always be fights along the way. My best advice would be to believe in yourself, because like Senator Inouye and those previously, and like Rep. Kapela, nobody expected me to win. I won by a landslide. All the political pundits, I mean, none of the unions endorsed me. And when they came knocking on my door asking me for something, saying that they are going to make sure and campaign against me if I voted a certain way, I pointed out that none of them endorsed me, yet I still won by a landslide. So believe in yourself. There will be sexism until somehow or other a miracle happens, but be able to overcome it. Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for joining us. Senator Acasio.
Well, I really can't say it any better than Representative Kapela, and thank you for adding on to that, Senator Buenaventura, and thank you for sharing, everyone on this panel. Thank you for sharing all of your mana'o. I've learned a lot this evening, and you know, I just resonate with a lot of things folks have said. In terms of the sexism that I've experienced personally, I've only been in the Senate for a short amount of time. I'm really inspired by building the relationships with my fellow women senators. We're a voting bloc, right? So we're really a force within the Senate. We have potentially anything that really resonates with who we are as women. And so, you know, I want to like look at that and really nurture that, and, you know, build that kind of camaraderie and collaboration amongst us. And we do that in our different ways by meeting individually and also meeting as a group. That camaraderie, the friendship, the mentorship that I feel lifted, I feel seen, I feel validated, I feel affirmed. And I'm really grateful to male colleagues who support powerful women, who are not intimidated by powerful women, who are not threatened at all. Because, and I just want to say, you know, similar to Shannon, people have asked me about my children. I think for me, it was more about, you know, they just wanted to check in. And do they do that with men? I'm not sure. But I just have to give props to my husband too, because that he's allowing this to happen, in the sense that what would I would take on while I'm home here in responsibility for the house and the children, he does take on that. And so that's fortunate in a sense. And so I think there are barriers that can exist, and yet at the same time, absolutely hear 100% Shannon and agree. What you speak of is not applied evenly amongst the genders, and I really would like to see that. So I haven't experienced anything direct, except also to reiterate by women. And you know, twice on the House floor, I was silenced, not by a man, but by a woman. And how I come to it is just with love, and just to recognize my worth as a woman, as a leader, as a representative of my constituents, is that that person may feel the need to silence me, but I'm not going to allow it. because I'm there to represent my constituents. And while that may be truth to those colleagues, it's not truth to me. And therefore, you know, I just have to remain steadfast in that confidence and that empowerment and that knowing who I am. Unfortunately, I think part of it is not necessarily male or female, but just having been brought up in that culture of patriarchy. And just as a white woman, have privilege that comes with being Caucasian, being of a middle class, you know, having shelter, all of these things, that I still need to recognize the racism that I participated in, right? And so same thing with these gender roles is, how do I perpetuate that same racism? And so for me, in looking at those experiences and experiencing what I did with other, with sexism that has, or so, and maybe it's not even sexism, but they definitely are silencing. And so I take it to heart in terms of gender because of the ideas that, you know, women may be supposed to be subservient or silenced or all of these things, but I don't think they do that to men. In the scenario that I experienced, I can't imagine them going up to another, even a freshman legislator as a male and telling them, hey, if you want to make friends, you know, basically the quote was, let me give you a word for the wise. If you want to make friends, you don't speak to your concerns on the floor. And to me, that was astonishing because it's so sad, because that's what I'm supposed to be there for, is speaking for my constituents, raising issues. Again, maybe there's things that I learned along the way that there's a time and a place for certain things, but that's for me to discover, not for someone to tell me that that's because that's how they learn. At any rate, I'm very inspired by Representative Kapela as well, just for her bold leadership and her truth telling. And I was told by someone who is a very seasoned musician, very famous in our community, Hoku Hanohano winner. He told my son, if you don't have enemies or people talking stink about you, you're not doing something right. Meaning, you're just out there, you're subject to whatever kind of criticism, and in this nature, being in a public office, you know, you put yourself out there. We put ourselves out there every time we do our works, and yeah, so we just do our best. But mahalo for having us. I really appreciate this evening and this opportunity to speak with you folks today, candidly, lovingly, and yeah.
Mahalo, Senator, and mahalo to all of our legislators who are here to share their mana'o, and mahalo to all of you participants for hanging in there. I know we went over time by a bit here, so my apologies for that. Just wanted to add on to something Senator Acasio just mentioned. Thank goodness for good men. This is one of the only meetings I've had where I haven't been interrupted by my children, and that's thanks to my husband. So thanks to him for allowing me this time to be here with all of you and share all of this information and learn from all of you as well. And a huge thank you to LAM, Ladies Artisan Market, the wonderful team, and of course Aisha and all the hard work she put into this event. And just one more shout out to everybody here is please get involved. Whether it's by testifying at the county council or at the state ledge when it's back in session. Find a candidate to support. If one of these speakers resonated with you, please reach out to them and support them. That's the way you can be of service, whether it's by fundraising or volunteering or sign waving for them. I'm sure they could use your help during re-election time. And if you don't feel like you are being properly represented, wherever on the island you might live, put your name out there. And whether you win or lose at the polls, either way, you're creating a win for yourself and your community by getting involved. You're creating an opportunity to shift the conversation and stand up for your beliefs. You're creating connections and networking and potentially expanding your business contacts and community contacts. And so no matter what else comes out of it, it's a win for all of us. Mahalo again to Aisha. If you have anything else to add, I'll let you close out. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this wonderful event.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and to all of you fearless women leaders that are so courageous to run for office in such a male-dominated situation. I'm so blown away by all the ceilings you've had to crush and all of the, all of the strife you've had to deal with in this patriarchy that we all unfortunately are in. This is why I created LAM. This is why I am all about supporting women and female leadership. This is why we created the whole Businesswoman Academy, the networking group for women. This is my extreme passion, is to have these kind of conversations, uplift one another. It's very sad to hear that some women were more of the culprits in bringing in the sexism. That's very sad to hear, but that's another reason why I stand for women, supporting women, and everything we do at LAM. So if you are interested in learning more, please, schedule a coaching session with me, join our Facebook group. Everything's going to be here in the chat. Get on the waiting list to join our all-female business directory. Get involved with us. We are here for you and the community. We want to serve in any way that we can. And it was just an absolute honor to have all of you here tonight. Thank you to all the ladies that showed up and were present to this amazing presentation and talk story. It's really, really inspiring for me to see how many women showed up for this. I know we're all busy and COVID is crazy, so thank you all so much. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Anybody have any last minute questions? All right.
Great. Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you all.
Aloha.
Aloha. Have a good night.